Not everything Batman is good. This was something that was actually brought to my attention a few weeks ago when I did review the very first episode of Batman Caped Crusader, and honestly, that is very true. If you look back, there are multiple projects, and just because they are titled Batman or Beware the Batman, there are oftentimes not great shows, even if you have an iconic great character. A lot of times what matters most is how intriguing the story is, but not only that, how well does it represent said character. And when you're dealing with a character as popular, as iconic as Batman, the Caped Crusader, the Dark Knight, that definitely rings true even more so than other characters. Because you do have to get certain elements and certain things right for people to be able to enjoy whatever they are watching. If it's a project that just does not represent the character, rightfully so, people are not going to like it and it's not going to resonate with the general audience. And honestly, when I first started reviewing Batman Caped Crusader episode by episode, I did start to feel that way. However, with this latest episode, episode 3, a lot of that was changed. And a lot of my opinions and preconceived notions about this show were definitely changed and totally flipped around. And that's why today we are talking Batman Caped Crusader, episode 3, breakdown and review. But before we get into anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Alright, Batman Caped Crusader, Episode 3. So this one introduces one of the most iconic characters related to Batman, Selena Kyle, Catwoman. However, it also gives us a look at another character who I believe in the future will be a pretty significant character, especially with Season 2 on the way in 2026. But that being said, I want to start out with all of the good that did happen in this episode, and honestly, there's a lot of it. So right off the bat, with the introduction of Selena Kyle, we get a good banter, a good exchange of chemistry between Bruce Wayne and Selena Kyle. And the only part of this scene that I'm not a huge fan of is the fact that Bruce Wayne's mother's pearls are on display in this museum. To me, I personally don't think that Bruce Wayne would ever separate himself with those pearls. Now, we do find out later that they are just on loan to that museum and it is a temporary thing. However, again, just getting into the psychology of Batman, do I ever think that it would make sense that he would separate himself from that family heirloom, from the thing his mother was wearing that night? Personally, no. However, I do at least understand it and I can get past that. We do see that moment where Selena Kyle is intrigued by the pearls. She obviously, you can definitely tell right away she is going to attempt to steal them, and even Bruce Wayne himself does come to that conclusion, especially because in this universe, it is well known that Selena Kyle has been a cat burglar. The only thing is, she often gets her case thrown out due to lack of evidence. So that's why she is running around free, because we have to remember this is a story that takes place in the 40s or 50s. So technology is not that advanced. So it's much easier for people to get away with crimes like this, even when she is captured later in this episode with the cat outfit on. And she literally has her identity exposed and still gets released. But that being said, it does make sense for this time period. And the other thing that I really liked about this scene in particular was that moment where the journalist is standing there and starts talking about the pearls, and he mentions that I don't know why anyone would go into Crime Alley wearing these pearls. They were asking for something to happen. And this is a moment that is kind of common to happen, not the specific words or the dialogue exchange, but more so a character saying something so outlandish, so stupid, so gut-wrenching that it pisses us, the audience, off. And a lot of times we want the main protagonist to have a reaction to this. But a lot of times, especially if it is Batman in his Bruce Wayne persona, he's not going to act on it because he knows that is going to put him in the spotlight. However, the reason I love this moment so much is because it flips that expectation that we are normally used to seeing from our hero and from our protagonist, and it changes everything. He literally looks at the guy and punches him directly in the face. In front of everyone, he has a photo taken of him, and he does have charges brought upon him. And in the moment watching this, I was immediately hooked on the episode from that point on. Not only because of the repercussions of that and what we were going to explore through this episode, but the fact that it's showing us that this Bruce Wayne is definitely different. He is definitely a younger version of Batman who is just starting out. And although he does do a really good job at separating himself from the persona of Batman, he does still let that anger out at times. And this was a perfect example of that. Right in front of him, someone was insulting his mother. Someone was almost saying, oh, she kind of deserved what she got because who would walk down Crime Alley with that expensive jewelry? So yeah, rightfully so, he had a reaction and he decked the guy. Absolutely decked him, and it was great to see. Now, the downside was that, as I mentioned, someone did get a picture of it, so charges were brought. However, because it is Bruce Wayne, he has the best lawyers possible. Lucius Fox, as I mentioned before, in this universe is actually his lawyer. So because of that, they were able to get some sort of plea deal and plea bargain arranged, where instead of serving any type of jail time for a felony assault charge, because mind you, this wasn't any type of misdemeanor, it was a felony charge, and that is stated later when he does get his punishment. And his punishment actually brings us to a character that, in my opinion, is going to be a big factor, specifically in Season 2. And that is Dr. HARLEEN QUINZEL. Yes, the character who eventually does become Harley Quinn is Bruce Wayne's therapist. And I personally think this is a really cool choice, and I do enjoy the dynamic and the banter between Bruce Wayne and Harley Quinn. Her understanding that a lot of people would see him and that he is just a cardboard cutout of who he is. He is the stereotypical billionaire playboy who only cares about partying, who buries his feelings just in alcohol and women. However, she sees past that. And that's why by the end of their sessions, she wants them to continue. Even though the court order is over, she encourages him to continue. And what I find even more interesting is that not only is she trying to convince him of this, but so is Alfred. Alfred wants him to go to therapy. That is something that is shown multiple times throughout this episode, not only right now in the current day that we're dealing with in Batman Caped Crusader, but also when he was a child. He mentions that when he's a kid. And that's the other really cool thing that this episode did. It showed us more of the past. It showed us when his parents got murdered and the immediate aftermath of that. And you have that great scene of Bruce crying and then Alfred waking up in his room and Bruce just saying, they're going to pay. They're going to all pay and you're going to help me do it. And you can see the look in Alfred's eyes where, one, he has no clue what Bruce is talking about. However, two, he's also afraid and fearful as to what exactly those words could mean. And obviously, we do know in most iterations, Alfred does not want Bruce to go down this path of vengeance or revenge, because he knows it will inevitably lead him to a lonely, bitter, sad life. And that's not what Alfred wants for him, because he does love Bruce like his own son. And that being said, I think pairing the therapy sessions with the repressed memories of Bruce as a kid was such an amazing choice that the writers had for this episode. And it did give us a glimpse, because obviously we all know what happened that night when Bruce was 8. I mean, this is a story as old as time for this character of Batman, but just seeing how it's slightly different in this iteration and seeing how Alfred just continues to try to pry little by little into Bruce, even doing something so simple as offering him that hot chocolate on their drive home, and Bruce saying absolutely nothing. Bruce doesn't even blink in that moment, and you can see Alfred is getting more and more worried about him. And then that is reflected in present day when Alfred says to him, I think you should continue talking to Dr. QUINZEL. I think this could be helpful for you. And I've even said that to you, that therapy to help deal with these things is something you really need. And we do get that line from Bruce where he says, no, just drop it. End it there. That's where I get into some of the things that I'm not a huge fan of with this episode, but I will hold that for a little bit later, because I do want to continue highlighting all of the positives about this episode. Another positive was how they did Selena Kyle's character. I really, really enjoyed it. As I mentioned before, she has already been caught, so pretty much everyone knows that she is this mysterious cat burglar. Even Bruce Wayne knows right in the beginning that it is Selena Kyle. Even after he captures her, he obviously knows it's Selena Kyle. And this is something that does just go on throughout the episode, because she is not going to stop. She is used to having some type of fortune to her name, so she doesn't want to go back to living a more poor lifestyle. So she ends up moving everything out of her expensive apartment penthouse that she did have and moves more towards the slums and she states to her maid that the reason she's doing this is because they are now on the run. They are now people who are going to have to live more of that runaway lifestyle. And the reason she wanted to move where she did was that none of these people are going to rat her out because none of them are going to talk to the police. So her moving there does make a ton of sense. Now, is it a great place to live? No, you can literally see the walls are falling apart. It is incredibly crowded. There are probably 20 to 30 cats everywhere. This maid is miserable, but it does make sense for the story and for her character. I do really like that she does kind of go toe-to-toe with Batman in a way, and she does use her feminine wilds to get the better of Batman. When he saves her, she kisses him, throwing Batman off, and although he says to stop, he does also underestimate her in that moment, and she pulls out those brass knuckles that are also somehow a taser. Again, I don't understand how that technology exists at this time, but let's go with it. It is still really cool. She does punch him. It electrocutes him and knocks him down. Then she gets into her Catmobile, which she decided to just make. I don't know how she afforded that. Again, they are still not that wealthy by this point, even though she has been robbing people for the better part of the last 6 months in this episode. But that being said, she does escape, so Batman does decide to lay a trap for her. And how does he do that? With the pearls that he does know she's very interested in. She made it very, very obvious how interested in those pearls she was. So he tells the museum, I'm taking them back. Again, I don't think they should have ever been there in the first place, but he does this so they do release a couple news articles and news broadcasts regarding those pearls, saying, if you want to come check these out, this will be the last weekend. They will be here because everyone is pulling them out. This is incredibly smart on Batman's part because he knows Catwoman will see this and she will act. But Batman doesn't only lay that trap, he also lays a trap for her to actually get caught. And he does this by going to the one reporter from the Gotham Gazette, not the one that he punched, the one who actually took the picture, and he says to him, I need your help, I need you to take some photos, and instructs him to catch Catwoman in the act. So Catwoman does indeed fall into the trap. She goes there for the pearls, Batman shows up, and the photographer is there to capture it all on camera. We do get kind of a lackluster fight in the end. Batman goes against some type of puma, takes it out almost immediately with sleeping gas. I thought it would have been a little bit cooler. However, that being said, it's not that important of a scene, so I'm going to kind of gloss over it. Then Catwoman is running away, and Detective Flask shoots her in the leg where she's down, and Bullock says, okay, we're going to arrest her. Flask says, nope, we're not doing that this time. Put those away. And he is going to, point blank, in cold blood, execute her. And this is really important because, as we know, the two crooked cops that we are 100% aware of are Harvey Bullock and Detective Flask in this universe. So this is just further showing the corruption that is within the Gotham police force that is going to be explored later down the line, especially because of how this ends. And it ends with Batman stopping Flask. He takes him down, and he also takes down Bullock. However, in doing this, not only does it deepen the connection between him and Catwoman, because she does have that moment where she's very grateful to him, even though he does leave her handcuffed, but maybe more importantly, when Batman goes to that reporter that he did seek out to get the evidence, the reporter says, hey, listen, I got all the shots that you wanted, but I also got something else. I got your interaction between the police officers, the fight you had between them. And although on this single camera roll, I have the evidence you're looking for, it's also some pretty damning stuff against you. So I can either burn it or I can give it in as is. And Batman, this is a very key point that I believe is going to tie into the next few episodes and kind of be an ongoing story throughout this season and maybe even beyond then. Batman says, no, that's okay. It doesn't matter. So he does turn in the entire film. And Alfred even later says this is something that is going to impact you and it could make things more difficult. And Batman doesn't care. He said that is irrelevant to me and it's actually a good thing because now they know I'm coming for them. And this is really interesting because we know Batman knows that there is corruption within the police force. But now the police are going to be onto that fact. There is going to be a faction of the police force that is going after Batman for good reasons for assaulting police officers, but there's also going to be the other faction of police officers, the corrupt officers, that are going to go after Batman, because obviously that's not good if Batman is onto them. So it is going to create this dynamic where Batman is facing off against both factions of the police force, and it is going to make it difficult for him to go after different criminals in the future in this season. And I do really look forward to that happening. That being said, Catwoman is brought to justice. They use the evidence. The maid ends up selling everything, uses it as back pay, and goes on a cruise. I found that kind of hilarious. I have no idea why, but we do then see Batman is happy that she is not going to be a problem, at least for the foreseeable future, and he is prepared for the ramifications of his interaction with the police force. That being said, that is pretty much everything I have for all of the positives I got out of this episode. And as for the negatives, to be totally honest with you, I don't think I have any outside of two things. First and foremost, the action was a bit lackluster in this episode, specifically the climax at the end. I mentioned that before. I just found that him fighting against a puma and then just knocking it out with knockout gas was really anticlimactic. However, they did make up for it with him going up against the two corrupt detectives and the promise of the future that we are going to see that storyline come to fruition. And I feel like we are in for some pretty action-packed episodes going down the line. So for that part, I can definitely forgive it. However, the one thing that I am still not a fan of, and it's something that I have mentioned before in my previous reviews, the relationship between Bruce and Alfred. I'm just not a huge fan of how cold Bruce is towards Alfred. I am hoping that that is just because he is diving too deeply into this character of Batman that he has created, and because it is the beginning for Batman, he does still have to learn how to be not only Bruce Wayne and not only Batman, but also himself around the people he can be himself around. And one of those people has always been Alfred. So I do hope that going forward they do flesh that out. But that being said, that is the only other critique or negative that I do have so far with this specific episode and with the greater show of Batman Caped Crusader so far. Again, if they fix that thing with Alfred and Bruce, I will be much happier, and it will lead to me actually coming back and liking these moments more because it will show Bruce's growth. However, if they do keep it the same and he is just this cold towards Alfred, I'm not going to like that. One of my favorite dynamics in comics is the dynamic between Alfred and Bruce and that father figure mentality that Alfred does have for Bruce Wayne. It's just one of my absolute favorite relationships in the entire DC universe. But that being said, that is everything that I do have on this episode. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this episode, if you enjoyed this one as much as I did, and if you kind of agree with me about the fact of Bruce being so cold to Alfred and wanting that to change in the future. Again, let me know in the comments down below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And I'll see all of you in the next video. Goodbye.